Alright guys, so we're going to do one word problem before I let you go do your practice. In this example, a golf ball is hit with an initial velocity of 80 feet per second, and we give you this formula. The height equals negative 16t squared plus 80t, and then there's no constant, where h is the height at any given time, and t is your time. So we're going to ask you several questions about this. The first is, how high is the ball after 2 seconds? Before I get into this, notice that we've used sort of the same formula for almost all the word problems. That's because very frequently this is used to model some sort of object that's going up and then falling back down. It's either being thrown or kicked or hit or dropped or something like that. So in this case, always you're going to have negative 16t squared, and then you're going to have that initial velocity times t plus your initial height. So this problem told us that the initial velocity was 80, which is why you see 80 right there in the equation. Golf balls start out on the ground, so your initial height is 0. Now, I know it's sitting on the little, whatever those are called, tees, maybe? I don't know. Sports. Who knows? But that's negligible in the sense of this problem. So whoever wrote this problem chose to ignore that little inch that was there, because they're measuring it in terms of feet. So that's inconsequential. So yeah, that's just a little side note. So how high is the ball after 2 seconds? Well, that should be easy to find, because remember, our two variables are h, which stands for height, and t, which stands for time. Well, if t is time and I want to know how high the ball is after 10 seconds, then I'm going to see what is the height of this ball when t is equal to 2. I'm just going to plug 2 in for every t that I see. And then it's just a matter of following my order of operations. I can either go through and do my exponents and then my multiplication and then my addition, or I can just put it into my calculator all at once. Negative 16 times 2 squared plus 80 times 2. I made it in my calculator. I know y'all get tired of me doing this, but I made it look exactly like it does on my screen. So over here it says negative 16 times t squared plus 80 times 2. It looks exactly the same here. So then when I hit enter, it just gives me the answer. That's the easiest problem in the world. Nobody should miss this problem on a test. The height of the ball after 2 seconds is 96 feet. And I know it's feet because it says it's measured in FPS, which is feet per second. So I plugged in seconds, I got out feet. Okay, so let's look at part B and see if it's as easy as part A. How many seconds would it take the ball to hit the ground? Okay, so a little less easy, because now I don't know t. Instead, I know the height that I'm looking for. I'm looking for what is t going to be when h is 0. Anytime I ask you about when the ball hits the ground, or when the ball finishes its flight, or whatever the thing is, I'm expecting you to know that that means your height is 0. Because if it's on the ground, it doesn't have a height. Its height is 0. In terms of the coordinate plane, that's your x-axis. So I am going to write this equation that the problem gave me, except instead of h, I'm going to put 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 80t. Now, you could solve this by factoring fairly easily, because you have a GCF that includes this t. So when you factor that out and solve it, we've done problems like this before that were pretty easy. Because this is the quadratic formula lesson, I'm going to show you how to solve it with quadratic formula, because it's nice to know how to use all the different tools. So my a is negative 16, because my a is always going to be the coefficient of the squared term. My b is 80, because my b is always the coefficient of the term that has a variable but it's not squared, and then, or a variable of degree 1, because there's an understood 1 there. And then my c in this case is 0, because there is no constant. Because remember, like I said, that initial height was 0. It's starting close to the ground or on it. Alright, so now when I plug in my quadratic formula, remember, I'm going to write it 2 blue million times for you. Negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. So that's going to be negative 80 plus or minus, sorry golf man, I'm going to write on top of you, 80 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 0. Okay, and that is all over 2 times a, and my a was negative 16. All right, so now I'm going to go through and simplify. Negative 80 is still just negative 80. 80 squared is 6,400. And I love it when I have a c of 0 because negative 4 times negative 16, I don't know what that is. Who cares what that is? Because whatever it is times 0 is 0. So I just have plus 0. Over 2 times negative 16 is negative 32. Now, I have negative 80 plus or minus the square root of 6,400 over negative 32. Square root of 6,400 is 80. I know that because the way I got that 6,400 was by squaring 80. So I've got negative 80 plus or minus 80 all over negative 32. Now, because I had a perfect square under my radical, I've got to keep going to get actual answers. Plus, this is a word problem, so even if I hadn't had a perfect square, I would have kept going and gotten myself decimal answers. So I'm going to come up here so I have plenty of room and go negative 80 plus 80 over negative 32. Make sure you keep that fraction over the entire thing. And I also have negative 80 minus 80 over negative 32. On this side, negative 80 plus 80 is 0 over negative 32 equals 0. Well, I know that the height of the ball is 0 at 0 seconds because that's when it's just sitting on the tee before it gets hit. So I expected that 0. That's good. This one should be the actual answer to my problem. Negative 80 minus 80 is negative 160 over negative 32. Negative 160. I should be able to do this in my head, but, you know, it's really early in the morning, and I haven't finished my coffee yet. It's still almost full because I've been talking too much. So when I divide that, I get 5. So what does that tell me? Well, if you think about the path of this golf ball, at 0 seconds, it's right here. It's on the ground again. This little golf ball is going to continue back down. It's going to hit the ground again at 5 seconds. So the answer to part B, which took a bit more time than part A, is 5 seconds. Part C, when will the ball reach 48 feet? I'm going to do the same exact process except 0, instead of my height being equal to 0, my height is going to be 48. I want to know when will this ball have a height of 48. Everything over here is still going to look the same. So I've got to put it in standard form, which means subtracting that 48 from both sides. So I get negative 16, so 0 equals negative 16 t squared plus 80t minus 48. All right, my A value then is negative 16, my B value is 80, my C value is negative 48. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because you've seen quite a few of these at this point. Negative B means negative 80 plus or minus B squared is going to be 80 squared minus 4 times A is negative 16 times C is negative 48. All over 2a, which is 2 times negative 16. All right, so I've got negative 80 plus or minus 80 squared, we've already figured out is 6,400. And then negative 4 times negative 16 times negative 48 is negative 3,072, so minus 3,072. All over negative 32 because 2 times negative 16. All right, 6,004. Now I have to do the subtraction that's inside the radical. So 6,400 minus 3,072 is 3,328. Okay, so I have negative 80 plus or minus square root of 3,328 all over negative 32. Okay, so now I have to figure out what the square root of 3,328 is. And if I could work a calculator, I'd be able to tell you that. All right, I get a decimal. Now, because this is a word problem, I'm not just going to leave it as the square root of 3,328. I want to have an actual answer. So, just figured out how to insert space, I think. Yes, so that I can keep working here. When I put square root of 3,328 in the calculator, it gives me this. Notice it didn't give me the option of just simplifying that radical. That's because the calculator is lazy and it does not like taking the square root of large numbers. So that's why we had to spend that time learning how to simplify them by hand, because sometimes your calculator won't do it for you. But I got negative 80 plus or minus square root of 3,328 is approximately 57.7. I'm just going to round to the nearest tenth or hundredth, whatever. It's going to be rounded at this point anyway, so whatever your paper tells you to do is fine. Over negative 32. Now I'm going to split it into two solutions. One that's plus, oh, that should be a 7. Okay, so one that's plus 57.7 over negative 32, and one that's minus a negative 80 minus 57 and 7/10 over negative 32. All right, so let's go ahead and do the plus one first. Negative 80 plus 57.7 is negative 22 over 3. Negative 22 and 3/10 divided by negative 32 is about 0.7. Okay, the other one, negative 80 minus 57 and 7/10 is negative 137. And 7/10 divided by negative 32 is approximately 4.3. Okay, so because this is a word problem and I have a question that needs answered, the question was, when will the ball reach 48 feet? So this ball is going to reach 48 feet 2 times. And if you think about the path of this golf ball, he's starting right here, okay? And he shoots it off, and then it comes back down somewhere, hopefully right near the little flag where it goes in the hole. Hole in one. It's going to hit 48 feet twice. It hits 48 feet, somewhere over here, and then again somewhere over here. So you've got to read the problem and try and figure out if you can tell what it means. In this case, I would assume that it's talking about the first one. It's not really clear. When will the ball reach 48 feet? Well, it reaches it for the first time at 7/10 of a second, so a little over half a second. It reaches it again a little after 4 seconds. So at 0.7 seconds and at 4.3 seconds. Sometimes it'll be more clear, like if this were a basketball and I wanted to know when will it hit the 10-foot goal, well then clearly I'm looking for that second time, because the basketball would hit 10 feet and then go up and then hit 10 feet again when it actually goes in the goal. Other cases I might want to know the first time. So you've just got to kind of read the problem, and if you're not sure, then give both answers, because they both make sense. They're both positive. So the answer is at 0 seconds the first time, and again at 4 3/10 seconds. All right, and I am finally done. I'm sorry for so many long videos in a row. Quadratic formula, it takes a while, but it's also really powerful. It'll work every time. So, if you don't have to talk through it, it really doesn't take that long. All right, so you guys have a you try you can do. Make sure you check your answer. Let us know if you have any questions, and then you can get to the practice. And I will see you guys in class. Bye.